Hey, everybody. I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of model how some of you are already getting a sort of style of using this vocabulary and these terms, the concepts, in your writing and how you're looking at artwork. But I wanted to make sure that you address the principles particularly in your finals. And I've asked you to include a written part of that. And at the end of this lecture, on this assignment sheet, I will have a little more detail on how to more effectively do that. But I thought it was a good idea that I kind of demonstrate how I would like you to perhaps talk about the principles and your work. Because you can't just take each of these principles, repetition, rhythm, variety, proportion, emphasis, economy, and balance, and just sort of tick them off like every piece has all of these in a significant way. I mean, some pieces don't. I mean, that's the great thing about artwork. It isn't a set solution here. So let me just dive in. I'm kind of just randomly, I grabbed a file of images that I had stashed away for some future quizzes or something. So let me just get started on these. I'm going to try and address each principle with each of these images. Okay, so this is a sort of a really funny piece. It looks like David, Michelangelo's David with the beautiful wavy curly hair, those big eyes, the kind of Roman nose, but he's articulated like a doll or a mannequin or something. And maybe he is, which would be even more fun, And there he is sort of cross-eyed looking at his hand. So first off, I would say that's probably the emphasis. I mean, he's got this stare, which there again, my theory that we look at people's faces first. I mean, that's what I do when I walk down the street. So what are his eyes doing? His eyes are engaged with that thumb. It's like, am I a real boy? I mean, who knows what he's really saying? David has always been, one of the commentaries is his hands are just incredibly huge. So for whatever reason, there he is looking at his thumb like it's an alien creature. That to me is the emphasis. It's, an emphasis can be one of the elements. It can be a principle. It can be scale. It can be so many things. It can be just, it's whatever makes the thing, whatever is the most emphasized in the piece. So this is probably one of the most difficult ones. And I think also economy for you guys. And you have to realize, even like this piece, that is a very representational in the head and the hand. The hand actually looks like it's been cast. The head probably sculpted. But regardless, so the hand, if it is cast, is probably so representational that there is almost zero economy, except that you could say there's economy because the person who created it did not go into all the flesh tones and the dirt around the fingernails. And, so there's economy in everything, except if you try and make something look, you cast something and paint it so it looks exactly like the thing, like a trompe-l'oeil thing. Everything else has some degree of economy, lots of things more than others. So does this have economy? Yes. If you look at the body, there are no elbow. Well, it just goes along with the stylization. And so I'd have to say this about economy. When things are pure abstraction, there is nothing to say you're economizing from. Right? You're not referring to anything real. So the economy there, things can be very stripped down and sleek. I mean, if you could just put like a plaster popsicle stick out in the woods and call it something or other, and it's rather economical in its sleekness and no fuss, no muss. It's not much of anything. But it doesn't really count because it's not really representing something except itself. But, well, anyway, let's go on. So the emphasis here is the dialogue between the eyes and the thumb. Some people just simplify emphasis to what's the dominant thing or the focal point. So that could be the same for the thumb and the eyes also. Economy, there is some economy. The body is very sleeked down. There's no chest hair, there's no scars, there's no whatever here. The hair is all these, swirling swoops, but we don't see every single strand of hair. So that's economy too. Balance, even though human beings are symmetrical, his posture, his pose is asymmetrical. So this is an asymmetrical piece. Also because of the viewpoint that we have, looking at a photograph, it's also asymmetrical in that circumstance, which always makes looking at 3D art a little weird, because we could see him looking like a stick figure, but from the side, and our vantage point says, oh, well, that's asymmetrical. It's an asymmetrical view, like it was a 2D piece, which a photograph is. Okay, I know this is getting really weird. Okay, proportions. Yes, the proportions are good. Maybe that hand is a little big, but, maybe that's part of the emphasis. Repetition, rhythm, and variety. Here again, when you have something that is realistic, representational, the artist isn't going to start putting, polka dots all over the skin just to make repetition, or putting scallops around the neck to make rhythm. I mean, the places where the artist is using his or her technique, like, is there rhythm in sort of the swirls of how the hair is, swooping around and framing the face? Yeah, okay. Things like that. And there's some other pieces in here that we can look at a little bit more. Same with variety. It's really not particularly pertinent in a representational thing for the most part. So let's move on. Okay, this is a big ceramic sculpture, like a monumental, when I look at it personally, and I'm a ceramic artist, and I think, oh, okay, well, it is a figurative piece. To me, it's figurative just because of the proportions. Here's the head. Is this some sort of weird hat? Here's the shoulders. Here's the big belly that goes down to the legs. I mean, that's what I look at it. That's what I see. But it's the same thing I see for some vases, which are the same thing. It could just be a large representation of a classic ceramic sort of vase, except that there's no real opening that we can see. But, the neck, the shoulders of the pot, the belly of the pot, the foot of the pot. I mean, these are all terms that they describe pots with, and they are anatomical. That's just the way that is. So there is always that sort of reference. But repetition in these swirls and, going into bullseyes and things like that. And there's a rhythm to that too. It's repeated here and over here and here and here. Variety, which is a takeoff on repetition. So yeah, these things are swirling around. More variety, this kind of where these ends come, and they're kind of a chopped, sort of serrated look in different places. The emphasis here for me, because I'm going to go the figurative route, is up here where the face would be, because that's what I want to check out. Hey, is this really figurative? But you may find these weird things on the side, or this really, everything else is pretty symmetrical except for this lopsided kind of tam that they wore in the French Revolution. That's the one thing that sticks out too. But is it just because of the lighting, and that's where the darkest mass is? I don't know, there's a lot of things. And all of these things are somewhat subjective. Not completely, but often subjective. And subjective just in where you're looking at the piece, your background. I mean, if I look at something that looks sort of like a pot, I bring a whole lifetimes of experience with clay and pottery and looking at abstract art that's going to be very different from you, who may be looking at it and going, I don't know what. I can't, I mean, I can't even imagine. I don't live your life. But, you know, we all look at it from different cultural aspects, different religious aspects, different sex, gender, race. I mean, we just look at things very differently. And that's just what's so wonderful. It's another thing you need to know when you go out and make your own art is that you can't control it. Once it leaves you, it's like your kids. They are independent beings, right? I mean, they are on to their own trajectories. You cannot control them, how they're judged, their actions, how they judge other people. I mean, it is, you've given birth to something and it's off living on its own life here. Proportion, to me, that's one of the reasons I say, oh, looks like a human, because it's got humanoid proportions. Emphasis here, I mean, I like to think of this swirling rhythmic thing, but there again, I'm going to look up here, this bullseye where an eyeball might be. So that's the first place I look, and then maybe down here where there's another sort of bullseye in this protrusion, whatever's going on out there. Economy, well, if the intent of the artist were to have it be a human figure, they didn't have to put arms and feet and a chin and all that other stuff. So there is an economy there. If it's purely an abstract form, then there is no, they're not economizing from something else. The balance of it, it's, if you split it right down the center from this vantage point, it's pretty symmetrical. Is it exactly? No. I mean, you would be proper to say this is asymmetrical. Okay, so here's a little building. It's actually a little maquette for a huge building. It's made of brick, these little modular pieces. It almost looks like it was put together in sort of a modular way, kind of carving something that was whole up and then kind of slamming it together like you were sticking blocks back together. Repetition, you've got these, this gets complicated describing this. There are these undercuts, these sort of beautiful arced curves that are on here that are often around the window openings, and there's a doorway, I think, over in this area. The way that the artist handled this, looking like they took a humongous wad of lard, 30 feet by 45 feet, and took, big knives and chopped it up. It's got a real angular, there's a geometric feel, but also very organic as well. So it's one of those weird hybrids. But just the way that the artist had the planes and the curves meet. The coloration unifies the whole thing. Is there a rhythm? Yes, these sort of arcs that come out, in contrast the ones that go in. So convex and concave areas, very complicated. Proportion, I am going to assume that it looks proportionate for a human to go in, but since it is a maquette for a larger piece, I'm not really sure. And since we can't see the door, we don't really know. The emphasis on this thing, I would say just it's strange. It's strange styling, abstraction. It's interesting design that look like something from the hillsides of Turkey. There are these incredible buildings around the Mediterranean that are made in these sort of cone shapes, or things that are built into the sides of of walls, of valleys, of cliffs, sort of. Emphasis for me, the thing that catches my eye, though, are these really dark, deep voids here, these negative spaces that are so dark and black in comparison to the whiteness of the whitewashed bricks. Economy, I wouldn't even bring it up, but I would just, if it was my piece, I would say I didn't think about economy particularly in this. Balance, asymmetrical balance. This, as I was looking at this carefully before, I always just looked at this like, oh, what a strange little composition it is. It's such a weird little thing that, you know, if we went out to a creek, we might find these rocks and start playing with them and making odd compositions, little sculptures on the side of the creek, right? Might be a fun thing to do. And as I was looking at it longer, I realized that it's a teapot. I used to take lots of pictures of teapots. Okay, so here's the spout. You know, this beautiful way they glazed the thing or scraped it down. It might be marbleized clay, and they scraped this down, swooping up to this little void up here, which is the spout. And then you go, oh, that's a spout. And then I can see here that this is the lid. It's all ceramic, so lots of trompe l'oeil, except for this up here. They took a real granitic stone and glued it, epoxied it to the top. The rest of this is all clay, just trompe l'oeil clay, ceramic. So repetition, the use of these ceramic components to glazes and to clay bodies, these pigments or metallic oxides to do the washes, same way they would make this look like wood. You know, you can play with oxides and sand it down and make things look just like a piece of wood. The rhythm of it, you've kind of got these swoops lead you to kind of swoop around a little bit, but then you're blunted out by this weird, clumsy looking stick over on the side. It doesn't have to have rhythm. It doesn't have to have repetition particularly. But if you can see it and that aids in your enjoyment, that's when you want to think about it. And when you're making your own work, you may want to be thinking about it. What adds to the enjoyment of looking at the piece that makes it unified and kind of flow together? Variety, we've got these kind of a cooler tan color here. This is a little warmer tan color over on this guy, a sort of russet color that makes this, to me, the real focal point of the thing, because this has a little bit different texture. It's a real stone, and it's a little bit brighter orange. It's a little bit of, you know, red iron oxide from some creek somewhere, some drainage where that was an element that was around it that stained this rock that way. Economy, yeah, in a way. I mean, it doesn't have all your, you know, compared to a classic English teapot, we don't have the same sorts of, you know, odd, elaborate spouts and things like that. So, yeah, am I going to bring that up in this? Probably not. And I could say it's a very sleek design, but economy, I don't know. They look like rolled river rocks, so not so much economy there. The balance of it from this view is definitely asymmetrical. Meaning, if I cut it down the middle and put a mirror over on this side to look back here, it's not going to look the same. As opposed to this piece, which is very symmetrical. This is a really cool piece, and I hope you guys all get to the de Young Museum in Golden Gate Park sometime to see it. They had it in the front for years. It's probably not there anymore, but it's a really interesting piece. Here again, I'm going to see it just because of this, the scale of the piece, and because it's got this lump on top, you guessed it, I see it as figurative. Here's the head, here's, the shoulders and where the arms might come out. Well, maybe it's just an odd person, but that's just the way I see it because of the proportion, because of the scale. That's the way I read it, as kind of figurative. And figurative art is a very classical art subject. I mean, it's a real no-brainer to go there first, one of the first things. What you can't see here, I mean, you can see some of the really beautiful patina and colorization on here. This is a kind of a cast plastic or resinous sort of material. So it's translucent, and they have it here in the window because you can get the light from the outside pouring through it. So when you look at it from the inside of the building, this is taken from the inside of the lobby downstairs. Inside here, you see the silhouette of what I am thinking of is kind of an embryo or a soul or an inner person. There's this other organic kind of form sitting right where, an unborn child might be. So, which makes you think about unborn ambitions, unborn talents. You could say unborn child, unborn whatever. I mean, something that is within you that is waiting to be birthed. I mean, you can take it as far as you want to go. Anyway, it is a really beautiful, ethereal piece, and for such a simple, symmetrical thing, it kind of takes your breath away to see it. The emphasis of it, if you could see it, it would be the light, the way the light glows through it, and that inner organic form. Economy, if it was a human, supposed to be figurative in some way, you could say it was economical that way. It also is very sleek, so depending on how you want to define economical, stripping away a lot of extra stuff, so whatever is the emphasis, in this case, this inner form, is made even more emphatic, then they did a good job. There's no little spikes on here. There's no curlicues and flowers or anything like that. It's very simple, very economical in that way. Proportion, it's human proportion. Variety, you've got this very rhythmic repetition of these bumps. The variety would come into this sort of more angled, more geometric lump up here, and these sort of fin-like, maybe they're protruding feet that come out. You guys have seen this one before. A lot of you didn't really realize, and I realize now I should have given more information on these. This is ceramic. These are handmade, look like they're cast in some ways, ceramic set of teapots. Proportion-wise, I think you could probably get your hand in there, but they are scale-wise. They're kind of tiny teapots, maybe used for more like in the tea ceremony, in a Japanese tea ceremony. They're a smaller teapot, which is made for a more expensive and revered and valued kind of tea. And so you drink it like it's a very elegant little liqueur. So they make these little tiny teapots that you just sip these special teas out of. This is seen as one piece, not, a dozen little stone-like teapots, but this is one piece, which is interesting. You're sort of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pieces. I mean, what's that about? The tray is ceramic and thrown, which is pretty phenomenal too, because that's kind of a large thing to do. So economy, there again, it's a very sleek down teapot, but a teapot nonetheless. I mean, a teapot is a teapot. The economy, I mean, I suppose, we won't get into that, but The emphasis here, I think, is on kind of this radial balance that it has, all pointing inward. It looks like some kind of a ceremony going on in here. Variety, they're all just slightly different shapes, and they've got a little bit different colorization on some of them. There's a rhythmic, feel of going from one to the other of these repeating forms. There again, radial balance, which is asymmetrical balance. Okay, here's this boxer again that we saw. Very realistic. I mean, this artist tried to not have any economy at all. I mean, look at the bulging veins. I mean, we see this person is probably just finished a fight or is ready to get up and fight again. The bulging veins and muscles. He looks kind of tired. He's reaching down. I mean, did the glove drop off his hand? I mean, what's going on here? Regardless, very representational, asymmetrical balance. The emphasis there is on this implied line here, this grasping for the fallen glove, which makes you symbolically think that it's a lost fight, perhaps. Or is it, is he trying again? So when you're talking about rhythm and repetition in something that is representational, I mean, they're not decorating this thing, but it's really the way the artist used their tools or made certain things show up. Like I'm looking at the veins, right? The veins that are bulging out of this skin, this very organic bulging skin, which is reminiscent of the bulges in this voluminous glove. But here again, here are these kind of small creases in the waist, where he's sitting. I mean, these are realistic things, but just in the manner that this person depicted these, it sort of is picking up and unifying, repeating these same sorts of little bulging lines that throw off shadows. That's how we can see them. The way the light will catch them, that's how we're reading them. It's then also picked up in the hair. Proportion, it's very good proportion. It's scale-wise, it's a little bit smaller than real life. As opposed to these are very economical little female forms by Esther Shimazu. She's kind of a very humorous ceramic artist. This one, this is the bigger one. This is 10 inches tall, right? They hang on the wall. They are not seen as one piece, but they make a very kind of charming set of pieces all together. But they are sold separately. So economical in that we don't have a lot of those veins. We don't have scars. We don't have this. On the other hand, that economy and not having a lot of detail on these very smooth kind of bodies, she's got an incredible amount of detail up here in these little tiny porcelain articulated teeth, right? Each one of these little teeth is there. And so the faces of these, which are sort of serene in a way, except for this one is pretty funny. But they're always very humorous. They look like they're enjoying life. What else do I want to say about that? Asymmetrical, even though humans are symmetrical in themselves, these are asymmetrical compositions. Emphasis on the face, and then you're attracted down to, we've got the two eyes up here, we've got the matching boobs, you've got the matching belly button, the matching mouth. I mean, it's, they're just sort of funny. Yeah, we don't need that. Okay, let's go on to this. This is Jun Kaneko, another ceramic artist, Japanese also. When I look at these, Okay, right. She's got figurative on the brain. Because of the proportion of these, this one in particular, narrowing down to the bottom, I always think of them as beings, right? They are beings. Now, whether you want to say that's, they're science fiction or whatever, but to me, they are humans in all of their variety. Each one of these is a person or an entity or a spirit or something like that. And then if you want to go a little further, that's just because of the proportion of these. But if you accept that, then what are these? Are these also, people, strange people? These are the cubey people, and these are the roundy, repetitive people. Who knows? I mean, who knows what's going on in this installation? Anyway, economy, if you want to accept that this is a human, then there's a lot of economy there. The emphasis, if I take this installation as one thing, the emphasis to me is sort of, one, the composition. I mean, it is overall, it is an asymmetrical balance, but from this vantage point, there is a visual symmetry. Each of these is symmetrical if you looked at them head on. In fact, most of these pieces, except for this right here, is going to be symmetrical in some way. But not really important to talk about here unless you're talking about each individual one, because I can step, 12 feet over and this thing's going to look completely different. So to me, the emphasis is on just this strange alien composition. This, because it's the biggest thing with the highest contrast, the white next to the black, that grabs my eye first. I would then pop to here because I see color over here, and it's like maybe the second biggest thing. Then I'm going to start hitting these warm colors here, but then I'm going to go here as well. And then I'm going to drop down to these things to find out what's going on in here. So, the cool thing about composing something large like this, or even small on a small thing, is your composition. And when you think of composition, you're going to think about all of those principles for making an effective composition. We've got repetition, we've got rhythm, we've got variety. We've seen this before. This is a Picasso. I am not sure. I think originally this was made of wood. I can't really tell whether this is real wood or whether wood was the original and these are cast in bronze. I'm kind of thinking that they're bronze at this point, because otherwise going around from museum to museum for, over 100 years or whatever, that they would be falling apart. So each one of them is almost symmetrical. I mean, this one's quite symmetrical. This one's really quite symmetrical, but really, they're all, if you want to be a purist, they're all kind of asymmetrical. There's a lot of repetition, just in the way there's these linear aspects, this way, the edges of these planes. And you can see this over and over again, which is why this, even though these are all separate pieces, when they're put together in one installation, as in a museum show, they really hold together, because, here we've got these linear rectangles and all these other linear pieces. The more, if you were to sit in this museum on a bench in front of here, you would start seeing the repetitive parts of this, and then the variety. We would be sitting there trying to make sense of it. What's going with us? What's not? The legs, you have these like boards that go down, but then there's another piece that's another protruding piece that's sticking out towards you in a number of these that splits the legs. So anyway, pretty interesting things. The proportions are very human proportion. Scale is not. Lots of variety, repetition, and small amounts of rhythm. Even if you took each one of these in a group, there's a rhythmic, back and forward and back and forward and back and forward and up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down, etc. The emphasis on these, I think there's a real sense of verticality and geometry for me. The emphasis on the infinite way you can depict human beings. I don't really want to talk about that or that. Trompe-l'oeil house. This is all ceramic. All of it is ceramic, all made of clay. So that would be the emphasis right there. It's like if you were aware that this is made of clay, you would just be kind of in awe, trying to look to see, oh, is that, no, really, isn't that metal there on the ferrules of the, on the pencils by the eraser? No, it's just glaze. But this bright blue is a real eye catcher, and this red is a real eye catcher, and it's picked up the repetition of colors. We've got this rhythm of this zigzaggy going on the pencils and everything. The proportion, well, the pencils are very proportional, so making a little log cabin out of pencils, the proportion is correct there. And that's why it's believable as a trompe-l'oeil piece of art. Economy, even though these were probably cast, all of it, there isn't, if you went down to look at the tips of the pencils, there's probably not the little striations and rough stuff there that you would see on a real pencil. But economy really is not what this person was about, right? The emphasis is about trying to make it look as representational and get as many details as possible in there. Asymmetrical. Let's not talk about that one. Let's take a look at this one. Beth Kavanagh. This is ceramic. The rope is not. So this is a hanging piece. Repetition. You've got the repetition of these, the legs, these sort of linear parts that are emphasized by the dark gray shadows on there. Repetition of these swirling python or some kind of snake body going around strangling this poor rabbit. Emphasis on this, well, you'd certainly go in to find out what this is, right? So you're gonna look into the face of this thing probably first, but the emphasis, I think, is just kind of the hanging pendulum aspect of this dangling, constricted organic creature by another organic creature that's got these really faint, these subtle, when you stop to look at it more, it's almost like when you see people that have total tattooed body art all over them, except this is a very pale blue. You can't see the head of the snake from this angle, so that makes it even a little scarier. What's going on with the mouth of this thing? What is going on? What is exactly this thing doing to this poor rabbit? The proportions of the rabbit are right. Scale, it's much bigger. Is there economy? Yes, even though this is so detailed, etc. But we don't have every little line put in there, every little texture of fur on here. We don't have every little scale on here. This is painted. Balance, asymmetrical. Okay, this is Peter Voulkos. This thing probably stands about 3 to 4 feet tall. It kind of has the proportions of a human, but it also, for me, who knows that Peter Voulkos is sort of the godfather of ceramics, and that these are just big takeoffs. These are all thrown on a potter's wheel. These parts are thrown. I think of them more as vessels. I'm sure they're hollow. So he throws all these big parts, he kind of rips them and cuts them apart. And these are called stacks. He's done a whole series of these. It's part of a serial piece. Many of these things called stacks, where he kind of cuts them and rips them and then packs them together, cuts out areas and puts these big chunks of carved clay. Very violent in a way. These almost look like windows, though. It almost looks like a funny elf house with the windows cut out and doorways and ramps or whatever. So there's a lot of repetitive and rhythmic areas, variety. Economy, not so much because it's a pure abstraction. Balance, it's asymmetrical, but like a pot that it started with, it's almost symmetrical. That's a cool piece, but anyway, so I just wanted to show you that, or describe to you that I want you to mention all of the principles when you're talking about your finals, whatever piece you are working on or have decided to do. You might even think about that as you are making the piece. That would be the smartest thing. But I want you to address it in some way or another. It may not be an important thing, but it just may be. So please make sure you know these principles and talk about them like you do. Describe them in your final piece as you do. So the rest of this assignment sheet that I am giving to you here on Canvas will be sort of an outline of how I want you to discuss or address those principles. So I hope this helped. If it didn't, contact me and we can talk about it a little bit more. So good luck.